booktubes. So today I want to talk about a book that I recently finished this morning and I loved so much, and I just need to talk about it. I will start with not going into any spoilers, but there's just so many things spoiler related that I want to get into with this book. So when that time comes, I will tell you, but I just highly recommend you to go get this book from your library, from Audible. Just read this book. It's so good, guys. So the basic premise of Scythe is that we are in this world that has conquered everything. There's no hunger, there's no disease, there's no death, and we just live in this utopian world. Now, of course, it's not really a utopia. That's a really important question that the book covers, but theoretically, it is a utopia. Like, everything that we humans deal with right now has been solved. Like, it is not a problem anymore. And there's also this thing in this world that because they have conquered death, they have also created immortality. And so what you could do when you get to any age that you want to, or when you get older, is you could turn back the corner. So say you're 52 and you want to be 20 again, you can go back to your 20s, which basically ensures that you could live forever, except if you are Greene. Because in this world, there are people that are called Scythes who basically have the power to Greene you or kill you without you being able to be shipped to a revival center, which is basically where, say you do something that would normally kill you, you can just be revived. But if you were killed by a Scythe, then you can't go to a revival center. You're dead. You're done. And so these people all types are the only people, the only things that can kill. We follow Citra and Rowan as they find themselves chosen to be apprentices to a Scythe, which is something neither of them want, and they have to try to navigate this world as it slowly becomes more and more complex. These teams must master the art of taking life, knowing that the consequence of failure could mean losing their own. That they learn living in a perfect world only comes with a heavy price. So yeah, I loved the characters, the world building, the plot. It was just so dark and complex. But now I just really want to get into spoilery thoughts. So if you have not read the book, go check it out, go read it. I highly recommend it. But now, let's talk about some spoilers. So first, I do want to talk about the world because I just thought it was so developed. And like these questions of what do you do when you have nothing worth living for, when like success in life is a guarantee? Like, what are you living for at this point? Like, you solved everything, but now that means that life has no purpose. And I just thought that was so interesting. That was such a fascinating concept because these things that plague us today, ultimately they give us meaning to make the most out of the time we have right now, because you never know what could happen. I thought this idea of the Thunderhead was a super cool idea, and I know the second book is called Thunderhead, so I'm super excited to get into it. And we got brief glimpses here and there of the Thunderhead talking to Citra about, I don't really like where this entire kingdom, Scythedom, is going, and saying that you and all my simulations are going to be important. And I really thought the Thunderhead was really developed and interesting, and I cannot wait to see where that goes. Like, this big AI that is all powerful, all seeing, and knows everything. And then obviously the Scythedom was really complex and really, oh my god. Just on the surface level, we'll talk more about the complexity of the complexities of the Scythedom later. But just on the surface level, the Conclave is a really great idea. The Ten Commandments, I just loved how, kind of like the U.S. Constitution, they were interpreted in these different ways, and the people who originally wrote them were disagreed with. And I just thought Neil Shusterman did a great job with that. Also with establishing the lore of the early Scythes, and also the Scythes having to take tests at every conclave. I also thought that was really cool. But I want to talk about Citra and Rowan. So I guess first we'll talk about Citra, who I thought was just such a great main character. Obviously, she meets Scythe Faraday by standing up to him when he comes into their house, not for gleaning, but for just getting dinner. But she stands up to him, and he sees that, And so she's taken into his arms. And I just thought she was so brave. She was so compassionate, amazing, fierce. I just loved her in this book. She was great. When Scythe Faraday self-gleaned himself, which we'll talk about later, she immediately went to the Thunderhead. She was like, I have suspicions that this might not be a self-gleaning. That someone else might have killed him after all. Then when she was accused of killing him because of the note that Scythe Faraday wrote to Scythe Curie, which, first of all, their romance, my god. And the punishment that they were given, they even said in the book it was an example to future Scythe's ward against having a kind of romantic relationship. Having this punishment of bearing 7 deaths and not being able to talk to each other for 70 years, just wow. But anyway, she's accused of gleaning Scythe Faraday because of this letter, and so she's taken into Scythe Xenocrate's and Scythe Mandela's office, but then she escapes and Thunderhead takes her far away, and Scythe Curie is like, we'll wait them out, and when they do come, I want you to go to this place, take this public car, follow my directions, and don't look back. And so I was like, okay, this is getting epic. And so then, of course, she takes this public car across miles and miles and countries and goes through airports, and it was just really interesting seeing her blend in as a tonist. And by the way, tonist, what an idea, but we'll talk about that later as well. But blending in with the tonist and then using the Scythe commandment laws to her advantage when she was in different territory. I was trying to predict, because I feel like once you read a lot of YA, which I feel like I've read a good amount by this point, you can kind of see patterns here and there. And so I was trying to predict what is going to happen, because obviously there was more to it. Scythe Faraday definitely did not self-glean himself, although it definitely would have been an honorable thing to do if he did do it. But we find out that he is alive and he's just retired and he's just chilling in a beach. And I really question why did he think that him leaving would free Citra and Rowan from their fight? I understood where he was coming from and why he thought maybe that would happen, but with the corruption that's in the Scythedom, why would he think that could be a possibility? I just realized I didn't change this calendar like I usually do, but whatever. And then she just hangs with him for 3 months. We don't see any of that. She does, and we hear about it. And then she comes back to the conclave. And then the day before the conclave, she's forced to glean Ben, which is, of course, her little brother. And, oh my god, I almost cried at that scene. If there was any scene that would have made me cry, it was that scene. Oh my god. The amount of emotional stress that I would have been in. She doesn't really glean him. She just, kills him. But he doesn't really die. And, I think I watched 2 reviews or 3 reviews on this book. And I think emmmabooks in her review said that, it would have been more impactful if she had actually killed him, which I agree with, but it still had a similar effect on her at the end of the day. But yeah, Citra, what a great character. She grew so much through this book, and her, I think it was very early in this book, but her apologizing to this girl that she hadn't really killed, she just rendered deadish, but still apologizing, showed a lot about her, that she wanted to do that. But now I want to talk about Rowan, who, in my opinion, yes, was more interesting because of the Scythe he was put under, because it made him a more morally gray character. So obviously we see him in the beginning of this book holding, what was the guy's name? Whatever, Cole something's head. He doesn't matter. Holding Cole's hand while he's being gleaned, and it shows a lot about him, and so he's chosen by Scythe Faraday. And I feel like my memory's really glossing over their apprenticeship with Faraday, because it wasn't really important to the plot. It was really important for the character developments, because they got into their heads this old school, this old Scythe lifestyle, this old Scythe mindset that definitely comes into the politics of the Scythedom. But yeah, he goes under this apprenticeship with Scythe Faraday, and then he's transferred to Scythe Goddard. And I knew it was going to happen, but I still dreaded it. And so we see him under Scythe Goddard's like mentorship. He starts to become more to killing, because Scythe Goddard obviously is a person who does these mass gleanings, who would do away with the quota if he could. And so we see him kind of adopt this mindset, even though he's struggling against it because he knows that's not who he is. But as he is forced to live with Goddard and he's forced to eventually kill or render deadish, I guess, these people over time, and he sees these gleanings, starts to really consider it, especially since Goddard, even though I don't think he's right, obviously, he has some valid points. But yeah, he just went through so much in this book, with suffering under Goddard's apprenticeship, not knowing what Citra was handling, not knowing why Faraday would do what he did. But then, at the mass gleanings, this is where a lot of important stuff happens. Of course, we get a lot of Tonist meetings. We learn a lot of information about Tonist, which I think Citra had to go into like a Tonist monastery or something and like tell them that one of their siblings had died, had been gleaned, and we learn a lot there about their lifestyle, which I think is also really interesting. Just now I want to talk about the Tonist because I feel like this cult religion is really interesting, and I'm happy that he included it, that they are still trying to maintain this old lifestyle, because obviously now they don't believe in a god, and it would be weird to believe in God or a god or multiple gods because they've practically owned death. They've taken its ownership away from God, taking the mystery from it. Yeah, like the fork, the vibrations thing, I just thought it was interesting. But anyway, going back to Rowan, at the last mass gleaning that we see, he basically, first we see Volta, who I just loved. He was such a great character. He obviously was really tortured, and he was just so interesting. Obviously, he was one of Goddard's junior Scythes, I think that's what they were called. And his character was really interesting, and so he has to kill these school children, and after he gleans all of them, he can't deal with what he's become. He can't deal with what Goddard has made him do, and so he self-gleans himself, which, oh my god, Neil Schusterman, you evil man. But anyway, after he does that, Rowan, he starts to make sure that people can escape the building. And then since he knows that fire is the only thing that they don't have an antidote for, he basically burns Goddard and his disciples to the ground. Rowan, he kills in this book. He becomes so stone cold, so numb in this book. And it's just so interesting to see his character progress, to see he's so willing to do what it takes to the utmost extreme. We see it with Scythe Goddard, and I saw in, I think, Daniel Greene's review that killing Scythe Goddard and them nullified and took away any tenseness, any conflict that there was in this book. But I completely disagree because, well, it depends on how the series go, but I feel like just killing Scythe Goddard and them, because Scythe Goddard was definitely the villain, if you want to call him that, in this book. All the parties he threw, and I still have to talk about that one party, but we'll get back to that. But I feel like his ideology, Goddard's ideology, is one that had plagued the Scythedom and many of its sites already, and I feel like the mindset that he had is still going to be resonant in the community, and just because he died doesn't mean, this non-quota, this mass gleaning thing is just going to go away entirely. He was just a precursor to really popularizing those thoughts. And yeah, and then we go to that conclave, and he just, we don't see the scene, but he just steps up. They tell him that he has to kill his mother. He just does it. Like, yeah, I think they said, like, they don't even finish reading the instructions, and he just does it. Like, oh my god. And he obviously knew that she wasn't actually going to be dead, but just for him to just be able to do that, it shows that he grew through this book and knew that he had to do whatever was needed. And then we obviously arrive to this last scene, which we knew that they both wouldn't glean each other, because obviously they're the two main characters. Daniel Greene was again saying that, like, it's YA, and so obviously they're not gonna glean each other. I don't know if this was an adult fantasy, one would have gleaned the other, but I just took it as a prerequisite that they weren't, and that something was gonna happen that would change it. So then Citra gives Rowan immunity accidentally, which I just thought was so interesting. And then they're arguing about this and what they should do. Should they place him in prison? And Citra's just like, go. Rowan, my throat. There's a public car waiting for you outside. Go far away. And so he goes into this public car, and Scythe Faraday is waiting inside. Oh my god, I loved that. And then, my god, the ending was so chilling. We see Scythe Lucifer, who I'm assuming is Rowan. According to rumor, there's someone out there who's seeking a corrupt, despicable Scythe and ending their existence by fire. One thing is certain, he's not an ordained Scythe, and yet people have started to call him Scythe Lucifer, which is super, super interesting, and I did not see that coming. And the last lines are just so chilling. They literally gave me goosebumps. And if ever Scythe Lucifer comes my way, I hope he'll see me as one of the good ones, the way he once did. So I think I just basically gave you the character and the plot of this book, but now I just want to talk about some of the little more minor details and some of the other characters in this book. Like Esme, I thought her story was really interesting at how she's like being used as this manipulation for Goddard to get his way with Necrates. I thought that was really interesting. Tiger being a party boy, I thought that was just a funny and really cool storyline. Now just some minor things. So this has gone way too long. I've stumbled too much. I'm not gonna have a fun time editing this, but I just had to get on here and talk. Okay, sorry if this looks different. I have to go get a drink of water. But anyway, there's just a few notes that I want to talk about. So I thought that like the way that Scythes choose to glean was really interesting. Obviously, we already touched on Goddard, who would throw parties and do all this crazy stuff, and then at the end he would just do this mass gleaning at a random place. Faraday, he looked at statistics from the mortal age, from our age, and see how likely people were to die if they like drove drunk or did this or that, and so he would choose people that would have been likely to die if they were in our times. Besides, Curie would just walk randomly and look at people who she thought had gone stagnant, who weren't really interested in continuing to live life anymore, and then she would glean them, which I thought was interesting because we get this example of a woman who definitely wants to be gleaned because she feels like she is stagnant, but Curie doesn't want to. And so eventually she meets this lady again a couple of years later, and the lady thanks her for not gleaning her all those years back then. But she now has a new husband, she feels reinvigorated. I think that was in like the journal entry, and I thought the journal entries were so interesting. Obviously, in the perspective of the story, with like Rowan not wanting to reveal anything to Goddard, so he just writes what he thinks Goddard is going to want to read. Then we see at the end of each chapter these journal entries sprinkled in from Goddard or Curie or Faraday, and I thought those were really interesting. They all came with like these fascinating questions about like the morality of this new utopian world, and I just thought they were all so interesting. I just loved the philosophical question that just brought up about mortality and like the importance of death as a part of nature to give new life and end old life. I thought Scythe Curie was really interesting, and like her reputation precedes herself, in that like she's been known as this grand dame of death for killing this president and the cabinet, which I definitely would want to learn a little more on. I thought that was just really interesting, and it was kind of glossed over, but just giving her this name, like the grand dame of death, which is like on playing cards, which I thought was really interesting, like the site on playing cards. Like I understand that technically, morally speaking, like they're good, they're doing good things, but I still feel like I personally wouldn't collect playing cards of people that could kill me if they wanted to. But yeah, there's just so much I could say about this book. This video has gone way too long. Leave your thoughts on Scythe in the comment section down below. But if you enjoyed this video, leave a like. Again, comment down below, subscribe, turn post notifications on, and I will see you next time with another video. Bye.